Chair recognizes Senator Booker.
Mr. Chairman, I think, and let's see for the record, I think that policy was ended on May 31st.
We're giving the
And
most
they're
current.
relying on documents.
The Chair's providing the most current information. We can continue the
Thank you.
discussion after. Senator Booker.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. And I want to thank all the witnesses. I think there's been valuable perspective given on all components of this problem, from what's happening at the border all the way to U.S. labor laws. I also have been sitting here and have some appreciation for colleagues of mine on both sides of the aisle who don't see this as a political blame game, but are trying to find constructive solutions to this problem. It's the only way we're going to deal with it. This is clearly a deplorable reality in any country, this violation of human rights and the exploitation of children. But to have it happen in the United States is so shameful and so outrageous. It should inspire the best of all of us to look to real constructive solutions. And it is so outrageous that this continues to happen year after year in the United States of America. There are children being exploited by companies and others who are absolutely deplorable. Let me get to my hopefully constructive questions. Earlier this year, I introduced the Child Labor Exploitation Accountability Act, which would hold corporations accountable for the exploitation of children and workers by simply saying that frequent violators, repeat violators of worker safety laws shouldn't be eligible for federal contracts paid for with taxpayer dollars. I think that if someone does this once, it should have real significant penalties. These are rational economic entities. If they know they were going to pay a severe price for it, then you would see it less happening. And so this is a legislation that, in my opinion, would increase penalties that would change behavior. Monetary penalties or debarment is important to address child labor laws. Ms. Gerstein, would you agree, just really simply?
Yes, I agree. Government contracting should support good, high-quality jobs, and at the very least, jobs that are legally compliant, not companies that are violating child labor laws.
Right. And the acting chairman, who's an extraordinary friend of mine, the United Farm Workers asked 100 senators to go out and work a day in the fields. He and I went out and actually did it. Some of the hardest work of my life. And just talking with the women I was working with and hearing their stories of sexual harassment, of wage theft, that alone shouldn't go on. But when you talk about child labor, one of the things that seems to me needed is funding for the Department of Labor. That just having the resources to do their work, as the acting chairman sort of whispered to me earlier. Could you just comment on that for a moment?
Yes, the Federal Department of Labor is grossly underfunded. The Wage and Hour Division has record low numbers of investigators. OSHA as well is at very low numbers. There's some statistics about how each workplace at current OSHA staffing levels would be investigated every 150 years or so. The Solicitor of Labor's office doesn't have enough resources either. I'm really encouraged to hear a lot of concern by the members today about the exploitation of child workers. But if we really want to address this, we need to fund the agencies that are charged with enforcing our laws.
I mean, that's common sense to me, that this is a functional way to enforce the law. I think there's bipartisan agreement on having resources for border enforcement. I think there's bipartisan agreement when it comes to our local police departments to keep us safe. But the people who are enforcing the law for labor, the people that should be out there doing a better job stopping this exploitation, don't have the resources they need. The final point that I have is that there are consequences for industries, and I want to focus in this last question on an industry, the meatpacking industry, which is more concentrated today, more corporate concentration than it was when Upton Sinclair wrote The Jungle and exposed the horrific practices that were going on. You are now seeing in that industry horrific practices and labor violations, including child labor. And I'm wondering if you think your commentary on, I'm seeing some move towards unionization, which there was far more. It used to be a middle-class job to be working in these things. Now it is a job where you see immigrants and exploitation. Is there any hope that union organizing that's starting to go on can offer any antidote to what's happening?
Well, there's tremendous support for unions among Americans. In surveys, 50% of workers say they would join a union if they could. 70% of people surveyed say they have a positive impression of unions, and yet only 6% or so of private sector workers are actually unionized. And that's because our federal labor law, the National Labor Relations Act, is really outdated and needs to be updated. At the same time, unions really do offer a better job and better jobs and opportunities to people. They raise standards when they're present in an industry, not just for members, but also throughout the entire industry. And one interesting, in relation to meatpacking, one interesting development after the Department of Labor's PSSI case is that JBS created JBS Sanitation and took some of these jobs, instead of outsourcing to a subcontractor, to the contractor, PSSI, took some of these jobs in-house and has an agreement with UFCW, and now these are going to be good union jobs instead of jobs that are being done by exploited young immigrant children.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Cruz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.